Hey everybody, today I'm talking about Myrmes, which is a 2 to 4 player board game designed by Johan Levitt and originally published in 2012 by Astari Games. This one accommodates 2 to 4 players and takes 60 to 120 minutes to play. So this game is actually about running an ant colony, which I think is an awesome theme and something that should be explored further because I think it lends itself to board gaming quite well. So the game is going to look like this when it's set up on the table, where you've got this big communal board here, which is made of this kind of a landscape of different grass and water and mushrooms and things. You've got all these different prey tokens dotted around the board on these bug spots, which can come into play later as we can try and hunt them as prey. You've got this area of the board here which you can use to upgrade and get new workers. You've got this objective section of the board here which you were trying to work towards to get victory points. The game is going to take place over 3 years, which are your 3 rounds, and each of those rounds is going to be broken up into 4 sections, represented by the seasons. So obviously you've got your spring, your summer, and your autumn. And then you go into winter, which is where you need to feed your ant colony by paying food cubes. So in the first year, you need to spend 4 food cubes, the second 5, and then in the final year, you need to spend 6 food cubes. And on top of this communal board here, each player is going to have their own personal ant colony, which is where a lot of the gameplay takes place. Where you're going to start with a bunch of these workers and you're going to have all these different spots to go to where you can produce fighter ants, you can produce new workers. You've got a storage capacity here, so you're going to start with a storage of 4 cubes. But you can potentially get that up to 6 cubes by upgrading your ant colony to increase your ability to do things. And you've also got some lava here, which you can use to manipulate these bonuses, which I'll talk about shortly, and to trade into food should you be short. So you've got a potential to unlock more workers, you've got a potential to make more ants, and each player is also going to have a bunch of these pheromone tiles, which can be quite important in terms of gaining resources and kind of expanding your coverage on the board. So as you'd probably expect with Eurogames of this nature, the objective is to score as many victory points as you can by the end of the game, and of course the player with the most victory points is going to be the winner. So let's talk about how we are going to get those victory points in the first place. So a round is going to start off by rolling these dice here. So you've got 3 different colours, again aligning to the 3 different seasons. And then you're going to put the dice on that matching spot. And what that relates to is this part of your board here, which gives you a specific bonus that you can use throughout the round. So as you can see, the spring one here says 3. So at the moment we're getting a bonus of this one here, which means that we can actually choose to harvest more resources from the board when we place our pheromone tiles, which I'll talk about shortly because it might not make any sense right now. But we can actually spend these larvae cubes to manipulate the track up and down to change that bonus. So I can spend, for each cube I spend, I can either move it up or move it down, and they do lots of different things, and such as giving you more victory points when you gain victory points, giving you more larvae when you produce larvae, making you move faster, making you produce different types of ants faster, and increasing your ability to place bigger of these bigger pheromone tiles. So once each player has settled on the bonus they're going to take for the round, and that can be done simultaneously, you can also simultaneously do the next phase of the game, which is where you're going to allocate your workers. And again, this is a worker placement game, so you can allocate these as you like. So you can go here by placing one of your workers to make more larvae. And as you can see, when you place the second one here, you can actually produce 2 larvae. You can go up to here in order to make these fighter ants. And when you do that, you're going to place one of these on here like this, because the first one costs 2, but the second one only costs 1. The generic workers here cost 2 for each one of those you make. And you can also go to this atrium part here, or so the atelier, I think it's called, where you can go to this part of the board, which can be used to do different things, such as increasing the ability of your colony to try and contribute towards one of these objectives and get things done. Because as you can see here, we're working towards different things to get victory points of 3 different categories. So we've got this one here, which is just to have 2 2 fighter ants and then dispose of them. You want to be collecting 2 of these different prey tokens to collect this bonus. This one here is to collect 3 different prey tokens, to have 9 of these larvae, to collect these resources, or to collect or have a combined value of 7 plus of these pheromone tiles connecting to one another. So once everybody's allocated their workers and taken the relative ants, producing new ants, or like I've done here, making this new fighter ant or creating new larvae, Again, adding them to your rows here. You can actually choose in turn to place these workers, or to use these workers in different ways. And you can use these workers in two ways, either in your own colony by sending them to these parts of your board here, depending on how far you've got. So at the moment I'm at level 1, so I can only send this ant here to collect a larvae cube. But as I pay for upgrades by spending these cubes and going to that spot on the atelier board, then you can actually send them here to get food, or just to get dirt or stone, or even trade in food to get victory points. As an alternative to sending workers onto your individual player boards or your own colonies, where they will stay with you from round to round. So again, if you send them to your own colony, they're not going to go anywhere. You're going to keep hold of those workers from round to round. But if you send them onto the main board by spawning them from one of your starting locations, like so, then you are actually going to lose those workers for the rest of the game, and you're going to have to invest in getting new ones. And the spawning spots depends on the player count here. So as a 2-player game, one spawning spot will be here and the other one will be here. And in a 3-player game, they'll be on these 3 dots here, and of course in a 4-player game they'll be on the 4 dots. So the map does scale depending on that player count. In a 4-player game you're using the whole map, in a 3-player game some areas are cut off, and in a 2-player game the board is basically cut in half. But let's talk about what we're actually going to do with these ants we're going to send out on a little journey. So you're going to start with a base value of 3 movement, which means you can move up to 3 hexes, but you can boost that if you took this particular bonus here to increase your movement to 6. And then you're going to again move hex to hex, like so, up to that 3 movement. But when you choose to end, you are going to actually optionally place one of your pheromone tiles, which are these things here, depending on your level of colony. So as the first level colony, you can only place a 2-sized pheromone tile, but it increases as you go down here up to a massive 5, or even beyond that if you take this bonus to increase your size up to 6. We can get this massive one down. And the idea of doing that is for a number of reasons. So first off, you need to place the pheromone tile covering where you ended your movement, like so. And then you're going to remove that ant from the board because it's basically spent, so you can't use it anymore. You're going to have to make a new one. And then you're going to place a number of resources depending on the terrain that you've covered up. So as you can see here, I've covered up one of these stone terrains, so I'm going to put a stone on that spot. I've got a dirt terrain, which I'm going to put with this one here, and these grass terrains are going to produce a food, which of course is a very important resource, because when it comes to winter you're going to need to feed your workers. Now something different about this game is that you don't actually have those goods at your disposal at the moment. There's something that you need to harvest during a future phase. And also, depending on that tile you spend, you're going to take a number of victory points. So there's a number of reasons why you want to place these, not only because of the resource value, but because in future turns, they are going to help you move across the map a lot quicker, because normally, as I said, you'd move 1 spot per movement, but when you start to line up these pheromone tiles together, you can actually skip through as many spots of those as you want as a single movement point. So they let you kind of skate around the board a lot quicker than you would be without those pheromone markers. The mushroom hexes do not produce any resources, and the water hexes are completely impassable. So going there is not going to be any use whatsoever. As you can see also, there are these prey tokens dotted around the map. And when you either cross those tiles or end your movement on them with, again, with one of your worker ants, like let's say I took my movement and end here, I'm going to have to dispose of a number of these fighter ants, which I could have produced during the initial round, in order to kill that particular insect. And you've got a little chart here which just shows you the rewards and the cost of fighting this insect. So a ladybug is going to cost you 1 fighting ant, but it's going to make you get 2 food, which you'll add to your personal reserve here if I was to fight and defeat that particular insect. And I think the little termite here costs 1 fighting ant, but it gives you a food and 2 points. And the spiders cost 2 fighting ants, get you 1 food and a massive 4 points. So fighting these bugs is quite important, and of course, not only for the food, but because some of these objectives are going to contribute towards, or are going to be made up of beating those particular insects and collecting those prey tiles. And also, as you choose to invest in upgrading your personal colony, you can choose to buy these special tiles, which are great because every round they're going to produce a certain type of good and not be exhausted ever. So not these ones here, the pheromone tiles, once the resources of them are done, they're done, and you're going to have to remove that tile and place it again. Whereas these ones are a consistent income, and where you're going to get things such as food, You're going to produce points and you're going to produce these resources as well. So these are a great tool to have, and you just need to put a marker on them just to claim that they're yours. And again, just a nice kind of banking on getting certain resources without much effort at all. So definitely worth the investment to get those special tiles. And after everybody in turn has finished using all their workers, you're going to go on to the harvest phase, where you're going to remove 1 cube of your choice from every pheromone tile you have on the board with resources still on them. So, for example, I could maybe take the stone here and this food here and add it to my reserves here and my storage space. Bearing in mind, at the end of the round, if I exceed this amount, I'm going to have to get rid of a certain resource. So again, increasing your colony is so important because it actually increases your storage capacity, because once you get to the level 2 colony, you can keep 6 resources from round to round, and before that you can only keep 4. And once you've finished with the harvest, you're going to commit any of the workers that you've put towards the atelier action onto this spot on the board here. So let's just say I put one of my workers on this spot here, then I'm going to send them off to this part of the board, which again will either increase my strength of my colony by paying the resources on my player board. I can give a new spawning spot as long as I put it next to one of my pieces. So let's just say I put this one here, and I would gain a dirt cube as well, which of course is going to make me a lot more mobile around the board. You can get new workers by spending 2 food and 2 larvae, and you can go to the objective part of the board where you want to fill these things. But when you go to that objective part of the board, you're actually going to have to sacrifice the worker that you use to commit to it. So let's say I collected 2 prey tokens. I'd have to put my little thing here to say that I've achieved that. I'd get a number of victory points depending on the player count. But also, if you beat other players to that objective and they achieve that objective after you, then any previous player will get a number of victory points as well. So it's quite good to get in these areas first so that you get the full benefit of them. And then you can actually start to achieve the harder objectives. I'm going from left to right. So you have to resolve them in this order. You can choose any of the 2, but you do have to increase the difficulty if you want to go from left to right. And once that's all done, you're going to do your basic cleanup, where you're going to take all your workers back, even the workers that you haven't sent out of the colony, you're going to take back into your pool here. And you're going to basically prepare for another round, removing that dice and moving on to the next season. Again, choosing the bonus that you want and continuing. And when it gets to winter, you're going to have to pay a number of food cubes, depending on the year you're in. So as I said, the first year you're going to have to pay 4 food cubes, and everyone you can't pay, you can actually choose to sacrifice a fighting ant or sacrifice 3 victory points. So feeding your workers is a very important factor of this game, and you want to make sure that you always have food in your reserve and not waste it. So let's talk about my thoughts about Myrmes. So first off, for a relatively, I suppose you'd call it medium weight worker placement game, this one has some pretty neat ideas and some pretty unique concepts. So first off, I love this pheromone style mechanism. I think that's something I haven't seen before. The fact that they are essentially your resources that you're making, but they're not yours to spend yet. So you have to harvest things in the right order to make sure that you have that constant flow of the resources that you need at the right time. Bearing in mind, at the end of the year, you want to make sure that you have enough food in your supplies in order to feed your workers. And that's kind of one of the nagging tensions in this game. You really do feel that pressure of having to feed your workers at the end of those years. And of course, even the demand raises as you go on, making it even tougher. So it is a nice game where you have to plan things very carefully, very meticulously, and not only to abide by that strict criteria that you need to fulfill, but to manage everything else at the same time, because you want to be collecting resources in order to create new workers. You want to be working towards these objectives because a lot of them need resources. You want to be increasing your colony because increasing your colony is so important in order to get bigger coverage, to place these bigger pheromone tiles, to get more resources in the first place. You want to be making these special tiles, and you want to have these constant bonuses in terms of increasing your storage capacity, because storage is such a tight thing in this game, and you want to be making sure you get down as quickly as you can, because you do not want to waste a single action in this game because it is tight. And that's probably one of the main takeaways from this game, is just how tight and restrictive this game is, which I actually think is a massive plus for this game. It has an ongoing tension, and the margins for error are pretty small if you want to get all that food into your reserves for winter. So I do like that, and that's kind of a weird thing because there's not a tremendous amount of player interaction in this game, which I'm fine with, because the player interaction mainly lies with covering certain spots on the board, getting the best kind of terrain in order to reap the food, etc., and beating people to the punch in terms of getting to these bugs and scoring points that way and getting food that way. And also, of course, racing for the objectives. There is another element that I didn't talk about in terms of these pheromone tiles, where you can actually choose to almost get rid of pheromone tiles belonging to other players when you walk onto them with your ants, and you basically spend a dirt cube and then get the resources off them that they've already reaped from that pheromone tile. So you can actually get rid of other people's pheromone tiles as long as there are no other resources on them, which is a nice little element here. But as I said, it is mostly you've got your head down in your own board and trying to work out this efficiency puzzle on what you're going to do. But despite that, the game manages to really feel tense. It feels like a tight efficiency puzzle, and that ongoing thread of what you're going to do to best weather this storm and keep your colony thriving is really a really strong part of the game that I appreciate quite a lot. And expanding on that idea of tightness in this game, even making new workers is tough, because you want to be making sure that you send them out onto the board, and even creating new workers costs you 2 workers, and you don't normally have that many in the first place. So you want to be making sure you get a constant income of these actual worker placement cylinders. And creating new ones is going to cost you food and larvae, but you need that larvae to manipulate your bonus, which you need to use efficiently, because actually getting this right at the right time is so important, and you have to plan your turns ahead in order to use this or use it usefully, because you can often you'll find yourself choosing a bonus that wasn't the best thing to choose that round, and doing so is going to put you at a disadvantage if your opponent has used that to their benefit. And of course, when you send things off to achieve these objectives, which is a big part of scoring, you do actually have to sacrifice one of these cylinders, which is a big decision to make, and particularly because you want to get there first and achieve those objectives, so that when other people go there after you, you get additional points. I mentioned on the intro that this game takes 60 to 120 minutes to play. At least that's what the box says. I do think that maybe at a 4-player game as your first initial play, that might be true, or might be the case in terms of getting to 120 minutes. But I don't think it actually is going to take that long any other time, because this is actually a pretty quick, snappy game. You do only have 3 rounds. Of course, 4 phases in each of these rounds, but 3 of them are the main actions, and one of them is just paying your food. So it's actually a pretty snappy game, and as it kind of harks back to that idea of not having much margin to error and not having much time to get everything done. You do have to kind of pick the path you're going to take. If you do want to work towards these big objectives, then you're going to have to get going on that from the right from the get-go. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself kind of falling too far behind and not being able to achieve those higher echelons of the objective tiles. But just because that's one way of scoring points, it doesn't mean it's the only way of scoring points. Of course, you can actually get a lot of points by placing pheromone tiles, particularly as you upgrade your colony and end up placing these big ones here. You can get a huge chunk of points. You can even be a bit more ferocious and go after other people's pheromone tiles to score points that way. So there are different routes to victory, and even go fighting these spiders and termites is going to be a source of victory points, and another strategy you might wish to take. So there are some different approaches here to give it some replayability. And I also like the way that this game is mostly played simultaneously. Yes, I suppose the bulk of the game and the main part of the game is when you're going to take turns using these workers. But I like the way that, the way you're going to manipulate the actions or the bonus action here to be done at the same time as the other players. Even placing your workers is going to be simultaneous, because you do not care what the other people are doing, because there are no blockers. You are using your individual player board, and that's going to be a double-edged sword to some people. I know a lot of people want a worker placement game to, for people to be fighting over the same spots, and normally I would completely agree with that. But this one still manages to do this well, despite feeling solitaire in this part of the game. So it's got a different feel to it, and I like the way that you can really focus on your own thing here and not have to worry about external forces, because to be honest, the game is hard enough as it is without anybody else taking the spots that you're going to need. Because again, mapping things out efficiently and to get everything you need done in each round is pretty taxing on the brain. Aesthetically and from a production point of view, this game is perfectly fine for me. I like the way the board looks. It looks different. There's not many boards that look quite like this. Maybe these prey tiles could have been a bit more cool in terms of the background on them. But the little miniature ants are cool. The colonies look good. And everything else is kind of your standard Euro cubes and cylinders. But as a general rule, I do like the production. You know, these tiles do pop quite well when they're on the board. You can clearly see what each of the colours are. And everything's quite well depicted in terms of its symbology and kind of iconography. So I've got no issues in terms of the production. Maybe the only issue I have is that these player mats are a bit flimsy, but this is from quite a few years ago when maybe production wasn't such a big influence as it is nowadays, when, you know, people want the massive grandiose productions, and this one just strikes a nice balance between being well done but not overly done. So overall, I have to say, games like Myrmes are kind of the reason why I enjoy digging through the histories of Eurogames so much. What a design this is. This is so clever, it's different, it has some real unique concepts, you know, especially the pheromone idea. The idea of managing your colony is just fascinating to me, and I think this is an absolute delight of a game, despite being very difficult to do well at. And that's the kind of things that keep me coming back to games like this. Because you cannot just sit back and just go through the motions and hope to do well. You do have to really plan ahead and get things done as efficiently as you can, because there is such a tight game. And that is the thing I've been the thread throughout this video, is how tight this game is. You have very little time, 3 rounds of 3 turns. Trying to produce workers, to get those workers on the board, to put the pheromones, to get your resources, to pay for your food, and at the same time getting those objectives done, getting new workers down, potentially spanning out new holes so you can travel around the board more efficiently, upgrading your colony, making sure you get the right bonuses, getting new workers into your fold. Everything is just so well put together and everything is meaningful. You can't really neglect one part of the game, and even little things such as getting the larvae is so important, because manipulating this track is so useful if you get that right, and can be the difference between the winner and the loser in a tight game like this, particularly if you're playing at a high level. So much I like about this game. I love the theme, love the concept. It feels different. It feels like it's just interesting. And as I said, these kind of games aren't really made as much as they were many years ago. But yeah, I know a lot of games kind of shower you and point in different ways, where in this one, sometimes getting those points is very difficult, because you do constantly have that nagging feeling in the back of your head, you know, am I going to lose everything by not being able to feed my ants? And, you know, feeding workers is not something that I particularly love about a lot of these Euro games, but this one manages to do it extremely well, and is a welcome tension, you know, good stress in a game like this. So overall, this is definitely one to check out if you want something a bit different and you like your more traditional Euros. You like that tightness, some good competition here without being too in your face, and the player interaction isn't overwhelming, but it is just enough, because you can't just neglect things and let people gobble up all these bugs or take all the best terrain. So yeah, literally ticks all the boxes for me. I'm really excited to explore this one more. That is Myrmes, a strong candidate to get my shield of quality. Check this one out if you love your Euros and particularly want to try something a bit different. A real testament to games that have really flown under the radar. Fantastic. Thank you so much for checking out this video. If you found it useful or at least somewhat entertaining, then please hit like and consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Additionally, if you wish to support the show, because I am a one-man operation and I don't get any support from publishers, then please consider backing on Patreon at patreon.com/chairman of the board, where you can back for as little as £2 per month. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.